The U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security issued new guidelines stating that the global use of Huawei's Ascend AI chips violates U.S. export control regulations, as these chips are suspected of illegally using U.S. technology. China's Ministry of Commerce further warned that any organization or individual enforcing or assisting in enforcing U.S. restrictions on Huawei chips will face legal consequences under the People's Republic of China anti-foreign sanctions law. This indicates that China may impose countermeasures against foreign companies or individuals complying with U.S. sanctions. However, after the China-U.S. negotiations in Switzerland, tensions have eased. China lifted its rare earth export restrictions, while the U.S. allowed Chinese companies like Xiaomi to use TSMC's advanced processes. Both China and the U.S. hold numerous weapons and countermeasures, currently in a temporary truce. But a more intense conflict could erupt at any time. It is highly likely that the Trump administration will provoke China first, with China retaliating in kind. Trump's global tariff policy faced strong opposition from China and ended hastily. The U.S. showed a high dependence on Chinese supplies during the trade war, and the U.S. government faced criticism for being unprepared and underestimating China's retaliatory strength. Given Trump's competitive nature, he will not back down easily and will likely prepare for another challenge against China. In the technology sector, the U.S. holds its biggest advantage in high-end chips and their supporting supply chains, while China's advantage lies in rare earths. Many bloggers believe both countries can harm each other, but in extreme scenarios, such as a China-U.S. conflict or a complete economic decoupling, the U.S. chip weapon is more powerful. The technical threshold for rare earths is much lower than that for chips. In this video, we will briefly discuss which is more powerful, a rare earth ban or chip sanctions. First, my personal view is simple. U.S. chip sanctions against China have persisted for years but have not crippled China. On the contrary, China's capabilities in chip design, manufacturing, packaging, and testing are developing rapidly, narrowing the gap with the U.S. Huawei continues to release new chips, and its Ascend AI chips have even threatened NVIDIA, prompting the U.S. government to escalate sanctions. This shows that chip sanctions have some effect, but are not fatal. However, after China imposed a rare earth embargo on the U.S., the U.S. tech industry quickly faltered. Elon Musk publicly stated multiple times that companies faced production difficulties, not to mention military-industrial companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. The U.S. willingness to negotiate a temporary truce with China and Switzerland was partly due to rare earths. In other words, from a practical perspective, the rare earth weapon is clearly more powerful. Second, the technical threshold for rare earths is indeed lower than for chip manufacturing. However, China holds numerous technical patents in rare earth reserves, mining control, and refining processes, which are difficult to bypass. Even in a wartime scenario where the U.S. disregards intellectual property and environmental concerns to fully invest in production, it would take time. Rare earth refining involves multiple complex processes, with high purity requirements that demand repeated experimentation. It is not something that can be achieved by merely claiming a breakthrough on a PowerPoint slide. Theoretical breakthroughs and actual mass production are entirely different. The U.S.'s biggest problem is a lack of skilled industrial workers, while environmental concerns are secondary. Additionally, the evolution and technological iteration of the rare earth supply chain require a long time. China began its strategic planning decades ago. Even if we assume the U.S. has access to all critical rare earth resources, it is impossible for U.S. workers to build a qualified rare earth supply chain in less time than China, given their professional qualifications. In contrast, China's gap with the U.S. in the chip industry is limited to a few areas, such as lithography machines and chemical materials. China has already made theoretical breakthroughs and is exploring mass production techniques. This gap is far smaller than the U.S.'s gap with China in the rare earth industry. Third, Many bloggers glorify the chip industry, claiming it is the pinnacle of modern technology. This is complete nonsense. Advanced chip processes are fundamentally engineering problems, not theoretical challenges. Engineering problems can be solved through large-scale development and trial and error. It is reasonable to say that advanced chip processes are difficult to break through, but claiming they are impossible to overcome is baseless. With China's wealth of chip talent and experience in advanced chip design, manufacturing, packaging, and testing, China clearly understands the direction of technological advancement and the existing technical challenges. I am optimistic that China will break the U.S. monopoly on advanced chip processes in a relatively short time. In fact, U.S. chip manufacturing technology is not more advanced than China's. It merely leverages its allies. The U.S. heavily relies on technology supplies from the Netherlands, Japan, and Taiwan. Xiaomi mobilized over 2,000 people and, in just over a year, designed a chip comparable to those from Apple and MediaTek, which was put into mass production. This demonstrates that the technical threshold for chip design is not high. Those who glorify EDA software and Apple's chip capabilities forget that Huawei was the first globally to release a 5nm 5G chip. Despite sanctions, Huawei designed and manufactured advanced chips like the Kirin 9020, X90, and Ascend 910, and released the Harmony OS system. Some of these products entered the enterprise market, while others were used in phones and laptops for the consumer market. Huawei has reclaimed the top spot in China's market sales, achieved within a fully independent ecosystem. If not for Google's GMS blocking Huawei, it could have already launched a large-scale counterattack in international markets. We must note that breakthroughs in advanced processes lead to rapidly rising costs. But honestly, do today's phones and computers really offer a qualitative difference compared to those from 5 years ago? Has AI created significant real-world value? Absolute computing power is important, but turning it into user experience and creating true value is more critical. The US is betting heavily on advanced chip processes and AI, but the actual output falls far short of covering the massive investment. This model is increasingly unsustainable, and the bubble could burst at any time. In contrast, China's AI, leveraging its dominant hardware ecosystem, is rapidly being applied in smart cars, drones, robots, robot dogs, and smart homes, creating value. Historically, Western technologies touted as insurmountable barriers, such as atomic bombs, hydrogen bombs, satellites, intercontinental missiles, nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, jet engines, manned spaceflight, and space exploration, have all been overcome by China one by one. When ChatGPT gained prominence, everyone thought China could never catch up in large-scale AI models. In reality, DeepSeek, Huawei, and Doubao became top-tier models in a short time, rivaling U.S. products. I recall when the F-22 was first released, countless military bloggers glorified it as the perfect blend of cutting-edge technology, materials science, aerodynamics, and aggressive aesthetics, an artwork that China could never produce. Yet, China quickly developed the J-20. The F-22 is now out of production, with maintenance and repairs so challenging that its readiness rate is below 50%, while the J-20 is being mass-produced, with its numbers far exceeding the F-22. China has successfully tested multiple sixth-generation fighters, while the U.S.'s sixth-generation fighter remains in the boasting stage. I cite these examples to tell those who hype U.S. technology as invincible to pay attention to how many planes the U.S. has crashed this year. At this rate, it may soon surpass India to become the world's top plane-crashing nation. A country that struggles with maintenance should not boast about possessing unbreakable technology. Finally, I want to say that the Chinese government is not naive. They know the China-US truce is a reluctant compromise that will not last long. The US will find ways to stockpile rare earths and other goods. And once prepared, it will resume conflict with China. However, the weapons the US thinks it holds have been thoroughly analyzed by China, which is not afraid. The countermeasures China displayed in the last round of conflict are only a small part of its toolbox. China's ultimate goal is to improve itself, not to make others worse, which is the fundamental difference in China's competitive logic. The truce allows Chinese companies to sell more goods, earn more money, and prepare for future challenges. It also enables companies like Xiaomi to gain chip design experience and train talent. These are tangible benefits. As for rare earths, the US can stockpile as much as it wants. China does not care. In the next conflict, the US will face new counterstrikes.